Morning, everyone. On behalf of CAPIO, thank you for joining today's webinar, Improving Your Agency's Storytelling with Artificial Intelligence. This webinar will be recorded, so we'll post that on our website. I'm Pam Allen. Hi. I am CAPIO's Northern California Membership Chair, and I also oversee marketing communications for the City of Roseville's Park Recreation and Libraries Department. So that's my day job, or my 24-hour job, really. So we're excited to start off this month's programming with this webinar. During this session, we'll learn how public agencies across the state are using artificial intelligence and incorporating community feedback and sentiment into their messaging to better shape their communication strategy. As a reminder, there's a Q&A button on the screen to submit questions throughout the webinar. There's also a separate chat button that you can use to chat with each other throughout the webinar as well. But if you could put the Q&A in the Q&A function, that would be helpful. And now I'm going to introduce today's speakers. First, we have Allison Paisner. She's the Customer Success Manager at Zen City. She works with cities across the U.S. to incorporate resident feedback into data or into decision-making and communication processes. Prior to joining Zen City, Allison worked for the City of Washington, D.C. as a program analyst. There's Paul Hosley, Communication and Media Officer with the City of West Sacramento. Paul's responsibilities include public outreach, media relations, social media, website content, video production, events and emergency communications. And he also previously operated his own social media marketing company, and he's also spent 25 years as a news director and editor for KCBS All News Radio and KGO News Talk radio stations in San Francisco. John, I'm good. You just told me how to say your name, and I'm going to mess it up.
Milner, close enough.
Milner, sorry.
I answered anything.
So John has served with the City of Palmdale's Communications Manager, PIO, since January of 2007. He and his communications team oversee public relations, marketing, city publications, design, crisis communications, social media outlets, and the city's TV station. Prior to Palmdale, he worked in public relations for Forest Lawn Memorial Parks and Mortuaries in Glendale, California. And then we have Whitney Skillman. Whitney has been with the City of Fairfield for 17 years and currently oversees marketing and outreach division, where she's in charge of numerous communications functions, including creating and scheduling content for the city's social platforms and websites, assisting departments with creation and dissemination of marketing materials, and producing video content for the city's TV station. After all that, thank you all for being with us today. We are so grateful that you volunteered to share your time on how our members can incorporate artificial intelligence into their communication strategies. And now I'll let you take it from here.
Great, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen then and get the presentation started. So good morning again. Thank you, Pam, for the introductions. That saves me the time for having to go through everybody. But thank you for joining today. Just a reminder, my name is Allison. I'm a Customer Success Manager at Zencity, joined by John, Paul, and Whitney this morning. I do want to extend a huge thank you to the three of you, and actually to all of the local government leaders, no matter what hat you wear. And the professionals who have been championing all of the communities through these unprecedentedly tough times. So in my work, I've personally seen a diverse range of communication strategies across departments in light of the pandemic, as well as all of the other challenges that 2020 has brought us. And so I just want to thank you all for your hard work. For those of you who may not be familiar with Zencity, we're a data solutions platform helping over 165 cities and counties of all sizes, 25 cities in California alone. And we help them make more data-driven decisions by better understanding their silent majority of their residents. So those who you might not normally be engaging with on your official channels of engagement on a daily basis. 2020 thus far, more than ever, has really been a testament to the power and the abilities of our local governments. Not to mention the role that data, or rather good data, and the use of good data that it can play in messaging and communications outreach. So today's session specifically will be focusing on how our cities are incorporating resident feedback and sentiment using artificial intelligence, or AI, to craft their messaging and to shape communication strategies, specifically around recent issues in the age of COVID. But first, let's talk about resident feedback. As communication officials, your main audience is residents, and you're accountable to your residents and responsible for incorporating their feedback into your decision-making processes and messaging. So you're not only responsible for keeping them informed, but it's also for hitting pain points that resonate and also engaging with the greater community. So whether that's online, on the phone, in person, although that's probably less common these days with COVID, these methods of engagement can take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and not to mention a lot of money. And on that note, you're also probably hearing on these channels from what we call the STPs, or rather the same 10 people who are sharing their opinions on these channels and vocalizing perhaps the loudest compared to the organic discourse in the community. So at Zencity, we believe that you don't have to work so hard to tap into that organic discourse and feedback that's already out there, publicly available online. And so how do we do this? Zen Cities AI automatically streamlines millions of data points from social and local media that also can include 311 data from city hotlines, with the goal of providing a mosaic of resident feedback, both from city official and unofficial channels. The next step is to run all these data points and all these different streams through the AI model, which analyzes the conversations according to different parameters. So that could be volume, or the social media channel, and sentiment over time. Zencity uses a category model. So our AI essentially understands what your residents' needs and concerns and comments are from the discourse by telling you the what and the how your residents are talking about. So for example, understanding that a pothole is a public works issue, or that congestion on the road isn't someone sick with corona, but that they're talking about traffic. So whether it's about transportation, parks and rec, COVID, masks, and everything under the sun, the AI is able to understand the what people are talking about, and then the how, that which would be, are they using positively charged language, negative or neutral language in their interactions. And then lastly, all of this data is available at your fingertips in our dashboard. So today's speakers will be covering how they're using these different AI features, not only to hear from their residents more effectively by saving time from going through different streams of social media and being able to have the full picture right in front of them, but also how they're using the information that they have access to from their residents to help shape and craft their messaging, and to also track the effectiveness of their messaging to make sure it's hitting the right people, and then it's being responded to in ways that you're measuring. And so lastly, we'll be talking about managing messaging during crisis. There is no shortage of that this year. And so being able to have access to all of the discourse in one place and tracking it over time, as well as the ability to separate channels for misinformation potentially, and identifying questions, can be really helpful. And so I'm going to turn the mic now over to John from the city of Palmdale, who is going to kick us off and get us started.
Hi, thanks, Allison, and thanks everyone who's listening in out there. So we at the city of Palmdale, like everybody else, has had quite an interesting year. We may have even had the most interesting year of all the cities here, as we'll talk about in this presentation. But obviously COVID was and is the big story of the year, and it's affected city governments, businesses, and everything, schools, everyone. And so when it started, we began our report with Zen City to get feedback from what people were saying. And obviously, At first, it was us pushing information out, just pushing information about testing, what's open, what's closed. But listening into not the STPs, but everyone, there was a lot of concern, obviously, for people who had businesses, people who businesses were struggling, people who were struggling with rent. So we responded, first of all, by coming up with an initiative we call Palmdale Cares. And Palmdale Cares is basically a broad program that covers everything from economics to recreation to food needs, housing needs. And as we created a website and where people could come and get information, and it's an organic, ongoing, living thing. So some programs start, some stop. So on the previous slide, there was a Take Me Home Tonight Palmdale. That was created in response to people concerned about our restaurants being closed, the people who were losing their jobs. And so our economic development team put together this program that we built on our website, a map where you could come, pick out your favorite restaurant, add your favorite restaurant, download the menu, order. And we were encouraging people to go home, on your way home, grab some food. This was before you could have indoor or outdoor dining. And it was successful. We had a good response. People were sharing it a lot. As the situation changed with COVID and the orders were allowing restaurants to first open, then close, and then open outdoors, we jumped on that and created an alfresco program and worked with our planning department and our economic development department to cut through some red tape to allow the restaurants to open up outdoors and to bring those, allow people to enjoy meals outdoors. And fortunately, we've had good weather. We do get hot in the summer here in Palmdale. We are a high desert, but they were putting up tents and misters. Been very successful. In fact, our local Olive Garden, the general manager said the revenues have gone up and they were able to bring back 25 employees. So it had significant impact. We had housing situations. We had grants for housing. We recently just did a business grant, and that's where you see our spikes when we push out the information, people engage, people share. And it's been very successful. We're offering grants to businesses. There'll be more. We also partnered with the city of Lancaster over the summer to do a program for car purchases. And you would buy a new car and get a $500 gift card, or a used car and a $250 gift card. And it was hugely successful. So we're listening to what our residents are saying and trying to respond to the needs as best as we can. We are limited. We're a city. We have limited funds, but we're doing all that we can to engage, listen, and to help our residents. In fact, we also did, I didn't have this on here, but our faith-based communities were expressing a need. They couldn't congregate. So we made our park available where they could come, drive through, social distance, and hold services. And we had probably 10 different churches and temples come and use the facility. So it's been getting good response. We're trying to listen to the community and then respond. So that was with COVID. On the next slide, this one's an interesting, I don't know if any of your communities have this situation, but it seems like every July and New Year's, but July mostly, we are inundated with illegal fireworks. And unfortunately, our residents think it only happens here in the Antelope Valley, but I've been in San Francisco on 4th of July and it's lighting up. Los Angeles is lighting up, but it's a big deal. It gets a lot of buzz. It's a hot point for a lot of our residents. And for the past 2 years, we've tracked it through Zen City, and we noticed a reoccurring theme, or reoccurring message from people. They were concerned about their veterans. We have a lot of veterans in our community. We're very veteran-centric. We're close to Edwards Air Force Base. A lot of veterans end up living in this area. They were very concerned about the veterans, and they were very concerned about pets, dogs, cats, horses. We saw this over and over. So what we did to kind of help get the message out was we took a photo you see on your screen, and that was shot right out here in our little square. Gentleman who was a volunteer for us and his dog. And we just said, please don't do it for them. Don't use illegal fireworks. So there's a little play on words, and people were talking about that. What do you mean don't do what? And it was our two of our biggest posts we've ever done. The good news is we won people over to the fact that the city was addressing and trying to do something. We weren't just sitting around saying, oh, there's nothing we can do. We were getting our message out. We were trying to play to the better angels of our natures. The bad news is it was like the 4th of July and the 4th of July here in the Yellow Valley. It was quite active, but it did bring to the table the discussion of why. Why is it? Where are the people getting these fireworks from? We happen to sell what they call safe and sane fireworks in Palmdale, and those fireworks do not go in the air. They do not explode. And there was an opportunity for some education of the difference, but where are they coming from? And we actually had our city council meet to discuss it with the community as to where they're coming from. We know they're coming from outside the area. You don't sell fireworks legally in California. They're coming from other places. So I thought, although it was loud and they were active, we got the dialogue going, and perhaps we can maybe address it better next year with help from the state and I don't know, maybe even the federal government. I don't know. So that was, I think, a good use of the data. So the third one was since I've been here, our biggest challenge. You probably heard it on it was an international story. Nothing makes me happier as a communications manager to have Palmdale on a national story, except when it's like this. This is nothing. It painted such a bad picture of our city that was not true. We had a young African-American gentleman was found hanging in our city park. I came to work, it was roped off, and there was a young man who was hanging. And your first thought is, oh my gosh. Now this is just a few months after the George Floyd situation. So the country is already on edge. And here we go. We have an African-American man dead in our city. So you'll see early on, everything lit up. We had we came out quite quickly. We got the report from the sheriff, the primary report. All indications were it was a suicide. So we put out a statement, and that did not go well. We did a press conference. That did not go well. We, at that point, pulled back and started looking at all this activity, where it's coming from. And we noticed a couple things. It was coming largely from outside our area. People here were very concerned, don't get me wrong, but there was a national impact and a national story. This story was tweeted by Kim Kardashian. It went everywhere. So we started looking at where this information was coming, where they were spreading it, the hashtags. And we had to hire, it was so big, we hired a crisis communications team to help us craft messaging. And as we crafted it, we were looking at where these hashtags were that were all this activity was, and we were dropping our messaging right in there. We went right to hashtag RIP Robert Fuller, where they were saying a lot of unflattering things about our city, about everything. And we were, because our messaging was, we were working with the state, with the Attorney General to find out what really happened. We worked with the family. We met with his family and said, we will work with you to get to the bottom, to do an investigation, a separate investigation to find out what happened. So this went on for about a month. We had several protests in the city, all peaceful. Our council and our staff engaged with them, sat down, kneeled with them. At the very end, when the report was done, it came out that he did, in fact, commit suicide. He had a history of troubled history of mental illness, which another thing we've seen from this COVID-19 is the impacts it's having on the mental illness. We're doing mental health town halls twice a month, addressing different groups, we did one for youth because he was 24 years old. And we've had suicides increase in our city during this COVID thing. So that's a thing we've also learned from this. So in the end, we got our message where we needed to get it, the right messages, and now it's a non-story. It was a week or two of intensity. But we did the right thing. We listened. We saw where we were getting some not so good messaging, and we put our straightforward messages right there. And I think that helped in the long run. And now it's a non-story.
Thank you for sharing, John. You and your team did an incredible job in the messaging and keeping an ear to the ground. And so
I think, and it was really great that we got to work with his family. I feel for them. I mean, that he's just starting his life, and we really made an effort to meet with them, and I'm very, very proud of that.
Amazing. And so moving from one incident and one crisis to the next, looks like we're now moving to West Sacramento. So Paul, you have the floor to share.
Hi, thanks everybody, and thanks CAPIO for putting this on. It's a great opportunity to hear from others on how they're coping with these kind of things and how they're using Zen City. Like John's situation, we had a very terrible officer-involved shooting just earlier it's in September, involving West Sacramento police and an African-American man. You can see on the chart when the incident happened, it was on the 12th. Police department put out a release just stating, hey, we had an officer-involved shooting, involved a man who got out of a car and brandished a handgun. And he was shot, and 4 officers were involved in shooting. So the initial report got a lot of interest, and you can see the first publication on the screen is the 25% bad sentiment, not bad, but negative sentiment. And then we released a second message stating that body cameras were activated during the shooting, and the public would get to see what actually happened through the body cam, and that we would be compiling that and releasing it soon. So you can see the second publication, the sentiment changed quite a bit. The third publication we did was we released the ID of the gentleman who was shot, and that message talked about his background, who was a volunteer for the West Sacramento Police Department. We knew this guy. He was also a code enforcement officer for the city, so was an employee of the city. But he was 88 years old, and his family, in this third message, wanted the public to know that he had been suicidal and had mental health issues. So you can see the sentiment then turned red again, and we discovered that that red not necessarily means negative, but it was sad. It's a tragic situation, like John's. It turned sad. So Zen City helped us kind of go through this. All right, are we doing the right thing? It was a backup. We send out these messages. How do we go on with this? The fourth message, which is not here. Oh, and you see this popular word cloud here. Can you go back just 1 second, Allison? That's one of the things that it's really, if you don't have Zen City, it's really helpful to see what words are popping up. Now, these are not just from our posts. These are from the public, the retweets, the comments that you get from Facebook. So these word clouds kind of give you an idea of what people are talking about. Officers. Coleman was the guy's name. Black was in there. Shot, gun. So it kind of gives you a quick snapshot of, okay, what are the buzzwords they're talking about? And okay, we have to address those buzzwords. Then the fourth thing that's not here, the fourth message we put out on the chart was the release of the body camera video, which showed pretty much this guy got out of a car. He had a handgun. The officers fired right away, and there was no, there was no question. It's still being investigated, but the release of the video and the transparency, as you can see, the Zen City showed a little flurry, and then it just went away. 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, nothing. So by looking at the data and the analytics, we determined that we didn't have to hire a crisis communications consultant. We didn't have to do daily updates on this. We didn't have to hold a news conference to explain. And it really helped us. This was a week and a half of just a horrible situation to deal with. And by charting what Zen City showed our communications to be and the comments we got, it really helped us kind of maneuver through this terrible tragedy. So that's that. I think the next slide.
If I could just jump in with a quick question. I mean,
yes.
Having Zencity with the AI being able to track the discourse timeline, I guess a good question would be like how you would go about assessing your communications and outreach, and how you would have handled the crisis otherwise without a tool like this.
Well, we would have been poking in the dark a little bit. I mean, we could still say, I could go to, look at Twitter analytics. I could go to insights on Facebook. I could, cruise the community discussion boards, which I do. But I could wake up in the morning, like I got this morning at 7 a.m. and I got a daily report. And we did a special a report on this incident. And so I got updates on that incident, and it was all in one place. And I kid you not, guys, it's so every morning I get 2 reports from Zen City. It's a daily report and the daily media mentions. I would have spent 3-4 hours a day trying to track this stuff down before, and I didn't have the staff, and I wouldn't have done it. So here's the daily media mentions. So you get these in your inbox, and what it does is it will put all your media appearances in one place, and also will surprise you with your story showing up, like John said, internationally. And it's like, oh my God, it's reached international. He might not be able to check that before, but because I have the data in front of me, I can go, oh man, this is really getting a lot of interest, and we have to really focus and react appropriately to the interest it's getting. So that really helps. And I know there's a lot of companies out there and software you can get and pay for to just track media. We're a smaller city. We're in the Sacramento market. We kind of know the players, unless the Wall Street Journal wants to do a feature story on our budget or whatever. But I don't need Meltwater. I don't need some of those other services that I know some of you guys are paying for, because I have it right here. So it's very helpful in that regard to track things.
Well, I'm happy to hear. I do apologize. I got very excited and we skipped a slide.
That's okay. We can do it. So we also have been using Zencity to track our COVID-19 messaging. Hey, we were just allowed to open up the recreation center and swim. Huge spike, huge green. Oh, we're shutting down hairdressers though. Oh, big red. So again, it's not a surprise sometimes, but it just reinforces what you're putting out there. And we use the Zencity reports for a weekly, what you're seeing on the left is a weekly communications report that I give to the city council and the city manager each week on COVID-19. As you can see, we've got to break it down: Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, how many hits here, how many hits there. And then the Zen City report is at the bottom. And I just linked to it. It's well written. It gives you a nice snapshot, and it seems to please the council members and the department heads and everyone else. And it gives you, the communicator, a way to report what you're doing without spending 3-4 hours putting together a report like this. So I find it very handy, and I will say again, it's really well written. All I got to do is paste that URL in and hey, read it for yourself. So, and also on this slide you can see who's doing what, and and who, just quickly, our mayor's very active on Twitter and Facebook, so a lot of his posts get mentioned. Public information page, that's our Facebook. Twitter's at the bottom, so you can see on COVID-19 which sources are being looked at the most, and then you can kind of adjust for that, or you can say, hey, wow, the food bank reposted our thing on that. That's kind of cool. I didn't even know that because I was too busy doing something else. Oh, they must have tagged us in the post. So anyway, it's very helpful for a 1.5 person shop. I could not do this on my own. I just wouldn't. And we just wouldn't have that option. But I think analytics and data is so important now in the way that we make decisions. This is very, very, very helpful.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing. I think those were very solid examples of being able to take the data, understand it, and when you're not able to copy and paste the URL, to be able to dissect it for yourself and understand what it means and shape your messaging accordingly. So thank you for sharing. And with that, Whitney, you're up.
Oh, hi, everyone. Again, thanks for having me too. For those who don't know where Fairfield is or have never heard of it, we're halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco. We have about upwards of 116,000 people in Fairfield. So like Paul and John, our staff for communications is really small. So being able to use AI has been amazing for us, and Zen City has a lot of really invaluable tools which we use all the time because we just don't have the capacity to cover everything that we need to cover, to look at under every rock and nook and cranny to find information that we need to find. And I really liked what Paul said about poking in the dark, because that's kind of how it felt before Zen City. We were just kind of poking around and putting stuff out there and hoping we were reaching people, and being able to use Zen City has allowed us to cast a wider net to capture conversations that were happening beyond our platforms, but that were of course still relevant to our city. It's helped us to really get a more accurate measurement of how residents feel about our programs and services. And it's also helped us to get a clearer understanding of what the majority of our residents were talking about. So in that first slide where Allison had STPs, I'm like, what are STPs? And then she said standard 10 people, which is so true. You know, on all of your platforms, you have the same 5 to 10 people who are always commenting, always complaining. They're probably the ones that are calling City Hall as well. So I love that. It's like I said, we're getting to see what everyone is talking about, just not what those 5 people or 10 people are concerned about. So that's really helped us to respond appropriately to immediate situations, evaluate and course correct for ongoing campaigns, and to create proactive messaging to address future issues. So next slide, please. So before COVID, we already knew that our safety platforms were outperforming our city's main platforms. Now, I don't know what it's like in your city, but in our city, safety, like they got to the party way before we did, and they had their social media going for up to 5 years before we even started ours. And I think just because of the nature of what it is, there's a lot more people who are really interested in kind of, you know, the criminal aspect of what's going on in every city, of course, you know, and I completely understand that. And while that's great for public safety, it's terrible for our messaging and trying to get our messaging out about other issues besides public safety. So back in April, I was really on Zen City every day, of course, because of coronavirus, trying to find out kind of what the hot spots were, what people were talking about, what people cared about. And according to our April data, 42% of the unofficial discourse was about public health. Now in Zen City, you can toggle between unofficial discourse and official discourse, which has been super helpful because we're able to see what we're talking about, and then we're able to see what everyone else is talking about around us. And like I said, before that, unless I was just willing to spend all day kind of trolling other platforms, I would have no idea what they were talking about. So it helps us to kind of go back and forth. So like I said, according to Zen City, 42% of the public was talking about public health. Of course, it's COVID. But when I went back to our official channels and looked at what we were talking about, the #1 topic was, surprise, public safety. We were only addressing, I think, public health was only 4% of our official discourse. which was not for the lack of us trying to get public information out and information about public health, but it was just because our platform was getting buried beneath our safety platforms. So because of this, we basically had to, ask PD and fire, hey, we're trying to send out this messaging. We're trying to reach what our public is really talking about, and would you please share our messaging? So hopefully, everybody's in a situation where they can ask their safety partners if they can share their information. And, ours have been really good about doing it, but it's just interesting to see if you look at these slides, like the slide on the left was PD's top slide for the month of April, and it was about people who were shoplifting from Home Depot. And it got a ton of eyes, but not necessarily the best sentiment. We were also able to see what kind of sentiment they were getting, and that only got a 2% positive sentiment. The slide on the right is our slide, just basically talking about CDC recommendations on wearing masks and trying to engage residents, like show us what mask, what you're wearing, what your mask looks like. And we got a ton of people who responded with pictures of their masks and such, and we received a 21% positive sentiment on that. So it's just important, like I said, to work with your other platforms. Hopefully you guys have the benefit of having more eyes on your platforms, but we're still growing. And like Paul and John, we have a very small, I think basically 2.5 people who are on our team. So Zen City has been really invaluable for showing us exactly where we should be spending our time because our resources are so limited. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so another feature of Zen City, which I love, is that you can create a project for something. So at the very beginning of coronavirus or COVID-19, we created a coronavirus project. And obviously the project became so large that we had to, actually we didn't do this. Zen City went in and broke it down into all these sub-projects, which was awesome because it was kind of a really quick way to just get in and look and see like what people were talking about all around coronavirus. So this volume of data and obviously everything we were seeing and hearing kind of reinforced the fact that we need to create a dedicated web page of resources for local businesses and individuals. So we did that on our website. We kind of pushed it out there. We asked our partners to share it. And the webpage received over 1,000 subscriptions in the 6 months that it was up. So I think that was hopefully something that was really helpful to our residents and our businesses and our community overall. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay, so another great thing that Zen City has been helpful with is measuring campaigns kind of over time and what's going on. So homelessness is a huge issue in our city, especially because we're the county seat and all of the county services are located in Fairfield. And like I said, the nice thing about having the access to Zen City is that you can look at your messaging and your campaigns over specific timeframes. You can pick the day, you can pick 7 days, you can pick 30 days, you can do a custom time period. So this was the information that I pulled up for 6 months when I put homelessness into the search. So it kind of showed us a few things. It showed us that the great thing is that people are having a 30% positive reaction to the messaging that's going out about homeless. The sad thing is that it looks like only 4% of the messaging is coming from our platform. Most of it is coming from the police department. So I actually passed these insights over to the Homeless Services Division, and they were really, really happy to see them and kind of understand, what work they had ahead of them as far as getting their messaging out, getting more messaging out, working with the police department to get their messaging out. And they are now in the process of doing a rebranding effort with supporting marketing materials. So like I said, this is just nice to be able to, reach out to other departments and just kind of help them and say, hey, this is kind of what it looks like for you if you want to, and give them suggestions for things they might want to work on. Okay, and then the last slide. I wanted to address future incidents. So as you may or may not know, we had the LNU fire here back in August. It was the 4th largest fire in our state's history, which is crazy. I never thought it would get so close to us, but of course you never do until it happens. The great thing that happened after the fire was we received this insight from Zen City, and it basically told us kind of what we knew, but it gave us quantifiable data and actual numbers showing what had happened, because of course during the emergency you don't have time to go on Zencity. You're so busy pushing out messaging, you don't really have time to look. But it's so nice to know that you have a tool that's aggregating all of the data around the emergency, and this is something we can use from and learn from for next time. So there were just a couple of things happening. The police were sending out evacuation maps on people's phones, and people were having a really hard time seeing if they were in that evacuation area because they had to open, pinch and open from their phone. So that was one thing that was really difficult for people to figure out if they were in an evacuation area. The town next to us put out some incorrect information about evacuation areas, which was also a big kind of did not help us. And then we had a group here, like a peaceful protest group, that was putting out information about shelters, and not all this information was correct. And I thought it was really interesting. I think John was talking about, there's a lot of information coming in from outside of our areas regarding stuff that's going on here. And I don't really know how or why. Well, I might know the why, but it's really great to be able to see where this information is coming from, so you can address it directly. You know who's talking about you and what they're saying, and you can go to them and say, hey, that's completely incorrect. This is what we're actually doing. And hopefully, they'll be open to listening to that. But because of what happened and because of the data and what we learned about how we handled our response to the LNU complex fire, we are now in the process of creating an emergency section on our website. And the emergency section will be featuring pretty much a lot of resources for our residents, including a mapping tool where they can go before the emergency happens and type in their address, so they would know where to go, where resources are when these actual emergencies happen. So overall, like I said, it's been a really, really great tool, especially if you have a small team to address communications. And it just helps us be so much more effective in what we're doing, which is really invaluable to us.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Whitney, for sharing. I actually have a follow-up question here because the three of you all kind of touched upon this at different points. But you alluded to this, Whitney, about the homelessness example, about how you share this information with other departments. And so as PIOs, all three of you are in the weeds, your residents, your communities, but oftentimes you have a hunch or anecdotal data, or an anecdotal feeling rather, and now you have the data to support kind of what you're feeling. And so I guess my question is, how is this data received by the people you are sharing it with, perhaps city managers, department heads? Are you sharing it with council? And kind of how you're taking that step from insight to action. And then just for those of you who don't know, who are probably looking at this recent fires insight on the left and saying, that doesn't look like AI. You're right. That's a team of analysts who are working with the data that the dashboard is collecting to help provide these kind of data reports, essentially, that are usable and actionable for our different teams.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's an actionable report, which is what's so great about it. But I think having the data to back it up, it just makes it more credible. I mean, I could say, hey, from what I've seen on social and what I've seen on, what's going around, this is what I think. But having the data to back it up, like I said, just adds another layer of credibility to what we're saying.
I would say the reports, sometimes I get requests. Hey, can you run a report and see how our tax, I don't know, any report or PD. Hey, can you run on the homelessness? How are you doing? But back to the shooting we had, I was able to take the insight reports, and you can export them easily in a PDF, and you just email it to the mayor. I mean, it's just like, oh, here's a report, boom. And so that's very, very helpful and impactful. But you'd be surprised at the things that you don't think you want to know about. But when people find out in the city that, hey, can you look at this? Yeah, we can look at this. Oh, that helps us go along in this project we're doing. So it is helpful. and shareable. And we even got requests from the public when we first launched. We were the first city to partner with Zen City, and we got scrutiny from the media that we were spying on them because of some people, the usual suspects. I can't remember the name, but the 5 people that always, oh my God, they're big brothering us. They got this new thing in the city and they're spying on us. And we had to say, well, actually, all the information is out there publicly. We're not getting any information you can't already see somewhere. So that was, just be careful about that. We had one of the TV stations did a report on it. What do you think the sentiment was on that? Red, 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 red. And, we tried to backpedal and say, no, this is really legit. And then there was another group that did some PRAs on it, and they wanted to see the reports. Okay, here's the report. So we gave them about 3 weeks in a row, and then they stopped asking for it. And really, they looked and said, well, there's really nothing here. So just be prepared for that if you launch. There will be some scrutiny.
We haven't had that. We haven't had that yet, but I would answer, it's to help us help you, help us find out what the needs are in the community and how can we better serve you. And this is a tool because not everybody's going to pick up the phone and call. Not everybody's going to send us an email. Not everybody's going to even post on our platforms. I wish they all did, but they don't. And as far as the reports, we don't send them all the time, but like during the Robert Fuller thing, where we had hired a crisis communication and the council was very concerned if we were, we were getting calls from all the big shows on TV wanting us to go on. And like, no. So we were able to, with these reports, to show them what we're doing is the right thing, it's working, and it really helped. It gave them peace of mind.
Great, and it's so interesting to hear all of your different stories and experiences with the data, with your residents. And with that, I do want to open up the floor to everybody else for questions that you might have from Whitney, Paul, and John, or from myself. And so I believe there is, as Pam mentioned earlier, there's the Q&A option, or you can also chat us. And so I invite you to ask your questions. And while we're waiting to get those creative juices flowing, I guess one question that came up a lot with COVID and, balancing jurisdictions as communications officers, again, you're putting out content and usually it's your own content. But with COVID and a global pandemic, you're now balancing the federal, the state, your county, like maybe perhaps conflicting messaging. And so I guess I'm curious to hear how your experiences were with COVID in identifying misinformations or making sure that you are getting the right information out there. And this is an ongoing struggle, I believe.
I think, like I said, with ours, just having that breakdown in the projects allows us to see what people are really talking about. And the thing too with Zen City is you can look at it from week to week, and it does change. People are talking about different things during different weeks. So it really helps in planning maybe the messages that you're going to put out for the week by being able to look at what specifically people are talking about around coronavirus, and also measuring the impact of what you're doing is having as well.
Great. And has misinformation been a problem for anybody in terms of COVID? Questions, masks, ordinances, messaging?
I think there's been a lot of confusion. We're in LA County, so the governor will come out and say something, and like something's open, but our county has been a little stricter. So people get confused and they call us and expect us, and we don't have our own health department. We go under the county, so we're under the county. So I think our job is to make sure we get the most accurate information. So on our website, we have I'm sure everybody else does, has a dedicated COVID area, and we just try to update that to the order as best as we can and answer the questions as best. Sometimes, people get a little upset at us, but you know, don't shoot the messenger. We don't have the power to tell you your gym can open because we are under the county's health order. And people don't always understand that, which is understandable. But I think that's the biggest problem is the state says one thing, the president may say one thing, but we are under the county and we have to steer people in that direction. That's what I've encountered so far.
I can go ahead and jump in here. I think this has been really interesting hearing from 3 different cities, all in California, kind of how you're using this service and this data to make decisions and move forward. Someone did have a question about costs. I don't know if there's a ballpark or if you want to kind of contact them, Allison. So what do you want to say?
So if anyone has questions about the cost, about Zencity as a tool, you can leave your email in the chat and we'll reach out to you, or you can take down my email, which is Allison, that's with 2 L's, 1 I. So ALLISON at zencity.io.
And then we just got another question in regarding, has anyone used the data to push for new programs or software that you wanted to do but didn't have support for? Did your counselor see the benefit of this data and use that decision? I don't know if any of you have had that experience. Go ahead.
We didn't really, I think we kind of have, it sounded like John did a similar thing, but we did a dine out downtown. Basically, you know, businesses were struggling, so we're trying to help them, and you know, it allowed people to go directly to an app where they could, you know, order their food, look at the menus, and then enjoy it during the farmers market. So that was one thing that we did develop from that with the help of our Main Street Association. But other than that, as far as programs, I can't really think of anything that we were able to use. I mean, to me, it's kind of all inclusive. I'm not sure what other tools that we would need to use with it.
You know, one thing, I think you could be surprised at some topics that do generate interest that you thought may not. And I'm gonna, not on a hard edge, but you put a picture of a dog in there with somebody, John, boom, right? And it's just like, really? People love that so much? The Easter Bunny? Are you kidding me? We did a COVID Easter Bunny thing. The Easter Bunny washes his hands. We did what? That resonated and just blew off the charts. So I think it was beneficial in that. So we're doing more bunny. We're doing posts with the dog. We're doing that kind of stuff that we kind of knew with social media anyway. You need an image, you need something fun, but it was like, are you kidding me? That thing got so much more interest than a double homicide on the corner at a 7-Eleven. So, you know, it kind of opens your eyes to that kind of stuff. What do people really care about?
Mm-hmm.
So.
A dog will get people every time, or a cat.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, I don't see any more questions coming in. So Whitney, Paul, John, and Allison, thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. And I also want to remind people that on October 22nd, we have a webinar at CAPIO about telling your agency's stories across multiple platforms, which it focuses on optimizing your content across print, web, social, and video. And then on October 28th, we have a webinar regarding Podcasting 101, how-to tips and tricks to get your agency's podcast up and running. So unless anyone else has something to say, I think that wraps up our webinar for today.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
Bye,
so much.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.